Hi there, everyone. Bryan from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and welcome to Mychal Fix My Stars, my new astrology hotline where I help real people troubleshoot real challenges that they face within their lives using the wisdom of astrology.
August 30, 1949, 2:25 p.m., Jacksonville, Illinois. And there's a weird thing about the daylight savings time, so it needs to be set to +6, just because of the way Illinois required the things to be recorded back in the dark ages.
Okay, got it.
I have had struggles with money most of my life. It hasn't been all terrible. I've gotten various gifts here and there from people that have rescued me out of problems that they didn't even know that I had, and some nice serendipitous kinds of things, but it's also included some pretty serious financial challenges. So if there's a way you might see in my chart that would help me navigate that a little bit better, that would be nice.
All right. So within this question, we're going to be looking at this chart from the perspective of the financial promise that the native has within this lifetime. And we're also going to see if we can troubleshoot any sort of ways that can ease the challenges that the native has experienced within her life as far as money is concerned. From a traditional astrological perspective, which is where I usually start all things astrological, we're going to focus on the second house. And the reason why we focus on the second house is because the second house gives us insight into our financial promise within this lifetime and into our likelihood for either wealth and prosperity or for financial difficulties within this lifetime. Other things that we can investigate as far as this is concerned are also the triplicity rulers of the second house cusp, but we can also take a look at the parts of fortune because all of these factors combined give us a clear understanding of the promise of financial prosperity within a person's life. Now, because this is a natal chart, we also always have to pay attention to who the ruler of the ascendant is, because that is going to represent who this person is within this lifetime. So let's take a look at these things. The very first thing that we have as we take a look at this chart is that the native is represented by Jupiter at 22 degrees Capricorn, 54 minutes retrograde, and in the second house. The reason why we say this Jupiter is in the second house is because we have a 5-degree rule in traditional astrology that states that if a planet is within 5 degrees of the next house cusp and in the same sign as the next house cusp, then that planet should be considered to be in that next house. And so this Jupiter is located in the second house. Now, within traditional astrology, the houses all have a name based on the nature of those houses. And so the second house is called anaphora, which means exiting the gates of hell. Whereas we have the eighth house being called epicatophora, which means entering the gates of hell. And another thing that people don't tend to know is that the 12th house is called cataphora, which, while I don't necessarily know what the translation of cataphora is, I know that it sounds like catastrophe and it also sounds like hell. So probably the 12th house is the catastrophe of hell. But anyway, these houses, the epicatophora in the 8th house, the anaphora in the 2nd house, and cataphora in the 12th house are all thought to represent various points within a chart that can represent particular difficulty within a person's life, even the 2nd house. One of the things that people don't realize is that the 2nd house is also on the spectrum of death within this lifetime because of its relationship to the 8th house and also because it represents one of these portals of the underworld. It's a far more auspicious portal than the 8th house because whereas in the 8th house we're entering the pits of hell, in the 2nd house we're rising up from it. So this native is represented already as being in her 2nd house. Now, within traditional astrology, this is one of the signs that says that this person can be an entrepreneur, because when we have the rule of the ascendant in the 2nd house, that's oftentimes a very good indication of somebody having a natural entrepreneurial bent. Now, one of the challenges or the difficulties with this particular Jupiter is that this Jupiter is in the sign of his fall, which is Capricorn, and a planet that is within the sign of its fall is a planet that is fundamentally not doing well within this lifetime. So we already see that the native coming into this life may feel as if she's coming in with certain challenges or difficulties that might feel insurmountable, or she might feel as if she's coming in with this feeling of having her universal significator of wealth afflicted. Jupiter is the universal significator of wealth for all of us. And when you have Jupiter ruling your ascendant and also afflicted, it can manifest as a sense of not just you yourself being afflicted within this lifetime, but it can also manifest as a feeling of the story of wealth and abundance and prosperity within your life being afflicted within this lifetime. Now, I am doubly saying this because she has the rule of the ascendant in the second house, and I wouldn't just be saying this if she had the rule of the ascendant elsewhere within the chart. So within everything that we do within astrology, we need multiple corroborative factors to point us in a particular direction. So she has the rule of her ascendant afflicted, and it's Jupiter, which is already saying that there might be a sense that there is a lack of prosperity and a lack of abundance and a lack of fruitfulness within the context of her life. And on top of that, we see this Jupiter placed in the second house. Jupiter is a planet that promises a lot, but Jupiter can only promise a lot when Jupiter is in a place to be making promises to begin with. And the only way Jupiter can be in a place to be making promises to begin with is if Jupiter is strongly, essentially dignified by himself. And that means that Jupiter would have to be in either one of his two domiciles of Sagittarius or Pisces, or in the sign of his exaltation, which is Cancer, or in any other combination of two or more of his minor dignities in order for Jupiter to be thought to be strong. So, when we find Jupiter in a state where he's not actually strong, it can very much indicate that the promises that Jupiter makes are promises that don't actually have the ability to bolster us within this lifetime. So, this could represent that the native may have experienced multiple unfulfilled promises, or she may have lived this life with a sense of the promises of financial prosperity not necessarily being delivered to her because the Jupiter is in the second house and in the sign of its fall, as well as being retrograde there. Now, retrogradation, according to Avraham ibn Ezra, is one of the most challenging things that can happen to a planet. And when we have the ruler of our ascendant retrograde, and I just posted a video about this, but when we have the ruler of our ascendant retrograde, it's yet another thing that can make us feel as if we might be set up at a disadvantage in life in general. That's just the planet. We have to know where that planet is retrograde. She has this planet retrograde in the second house, which can be an indication that she might feel as if she is set up at a disadvantage in life in general as far as finances are concerned. So that's something that we already see manifesting here. In general, Jupiter in Capricorn, I wrote about this in my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, can carry a feeling of having an empty table, or not necessarily having a cornucopia that's full of fruit and bounty, but it can sometimes make us feel as if our cornucopia is full of cobwebs and other things that don't necessarily correspond with a great amount of financial wealth within this lifetime. When we have the rule of the first house in the second house, it can be a sign of entrepreneurship. However, when we have the rule of the first house in the second house as cosmically afflicted as this Jupiter is, it could possibly be an indication that entrepreneurial endeavors probably have not been to the native's best interest within this lifetime, or they probably have not really worked out in the best of ways for her. Now, we also have this Jupiter as the ruler of her 12th house, which means that this Jupiter is a functional malefic. Any planet that is greatly, essentially debilitated is a malefic for the entire world, and it will be a specific malefic based on the house that we find that planet in. So, this Jupiter in fall and retrograde is already a malefic for the entire world. And the malevolence of that Jupiter is going to be expressed more so within the sphere of her second house, which is representing finances and financial wealth within this lifetime. So, this can be an indication that there is a hard stop within this lifetime as far as this particular topic is concerned. Now, if we add to this the fact that the Jupiter is the ruler of the 12th house, it can be a further indication or a further corroborative factor that's saying to us that one of the places where the native's silent suffering seems to manifest is within the sphere of money and finances. And the reason for that is because the 12th house is a house of silent suffering. It's also a house of witchcraft, not the good witchcraft that we practice, but the witchcraft that has to do with hexing or with cursing or with not necessarily allowing someone to have freedom or agency. So, having the Jupiter ruling the 12th house in the second house can say that the second house is a place, or it can say that affairs or matters of the second house tend to be things that the native might feel as if she has a lot of growing to do around, or it can feel as if this is an area in her life where there is a lot of growth that's necessary. Because very often the things that we find in our 12th house are things that we tend to push to the side because we don't want to deal with them. And therefore, those things end up being things that we need to do our most amount of growth around or our greatest amount of learning around. So, having the Jupiter in the state that it's in the second house, can be a further indication that this has been an area of her life where she may have felt thwarted in terms of her efforts. There could have been many, many promises that she has been made within her lifetime that have just fallen flat or fallen empty, because Jupiter is going to make big promises wherever Jupiter is. And if Jupiter is in the second house and not doing well there, then that's saying that Jupiter is making big promises that he can't fulfill as far as finances are concerned within this lifetime. And then the final thing with the Jupiter ruling the 12th house and being a functional malefic in this chart by virtue of ruling the 12th house can be another indication that is saying that this is an area of very potent and possibly uncomfortable pain that the native is experiencing within her life. So we've seen the lay of the land and we have a very clear sense of who she is and what some of the circumstances she has been through within this lifetime look like as far as the reality of just herself is concerned. The next thing that we would do is we would also take a look at the Saturn, because as we know, Saturn is the specific ruler of Capricorn, and we would use that Saturn as a means of assessing or understanding further information about her financial promise in general within this lifetime. She has Saturn at 9 degrees of Virgo, 14 minutes, in the ninth house of higher education and foreign travel. This is a very good thing for the most part, because this can be an indication very often of one of the places where we find ourselves gaining money or gaining wealth from. Wherever we have the ruler of our second house within our natal charts can indicate a place where we are gaining wealth or gaining money within this lifetime. And so this can be an indication that she could gain wealth or gain money from doing things that have to do with ninth house affairs. And those things can do with international communication. Those things can have to do with publishing or speaking broadly or teaching, because teaching is definitely a ninth house faculty. And it could say that education in general and the education field in general is someplace where she might move towards as a means of attaining a sense of wealth or abundance within her lifetime. Now, the ninth house, as we know, is also a house of astrology, and that could be an indication of that as well. However, I think in general, the reality of astrology is that as far as fluctuating fields or fluctuating markets is concerned, astrology isn't necessarily the most stable place to try to create a sense of wealth or affluence, particularly in the beginning when we're starting out and moving into a practice. That usually is something that comes a lot later on. So I would never personally tell anybody to enter astrology if they want to be rich, because that just doesn't tend to be the growth spiral in general of astrologers. But that is another thing that we see within this ninth house. So the reality of this is that these are showing places within her life or parts of her life where she can find a sense of wealth or abundance or a sense of being nurtured. The second house also has to do with how we nurture ourselves. And the reason for that is because if the first house represents our physical body that we're born into, then the second house represents how we are nurtured when we come into this physical body in terms of our relationship to our mother and our access to our mother's breast milk. So, having the ruler of the second house in a particular house within our chart oftentimes can be an indication of where we find our greatest and deepest sense of nurturing. So, this could say that she is nurtured or fed in terms of things of religion and philosophy and higher education and constant learning. And that's a part of how she is bolstering herself from feeling a sense of lack or feeling a sense of being without within her lifetime. One of the places where she feeds herself is coming directly from those ninth house endeavors. And if the ninth house is representing something that she loves so deeply, very often the things that we love deeply also represent sources of potential wealth within this lifetime. She also has the part of fortune located at 24 degrees Pisces, 50 minutes in the third house of siblings and community. But the third house is also a house of reading and writing, and it's also a house of spirituality. If the ninth house represents patriarchal religion, then the third house represents grassroots, more earth based approaches to religion and religiosity. So, having the part of fortune in the third house can be an indication that this vector of third house, ninth house is just something that she gets a great deal of joy and excitement from within her life in general. This vector of learning and teaching and listening and hearing and sharing information with others could be something that she's feeling a great sense of enthusiasm about, and these could be places within her life where she finds the greatest ability to access a sense of abundance and wealth within this lifetime. The third house also has to do with early childhood communication, and it also has to do with any foundational learning that sets us up in order to access higher realms of learning later on. So, this can also be an indication that if she wanted to move more deeply into a profession where she is teaching or where she is working with people who are needing to learn foundational skills and tools in life that she's already developed or that she's already mastered within the context of her lifetime. This can also be an indication that teaching and sharing knowledge in that sort of way can also be something that she does as a means of attaining success and as a means of attaining a financial sense of stability within her lifetime. Now, when we take a look at the realm of career in particular, we do see that she has the South Node within the 10th house, and she also has Neptune there as well. Sometimes people have Neptune within their 10th house when they're working within the pharmaceutical industry, period. And I was just reminded yesterday that Neptune is also a planet that has to do with capturing beauty. I wasn't just reminded, but it came up in a reading yesterday. And so when we have Neptune strongly angular within our charts, it also has a very artistic disposition, and it can also give us a very artistic disposition. And she has Venus Neptune. And Venus Neptune is something that I tend to love as far as art and design and beauty and watercolor is concerned. Venus Neptune is a wonderful thing for giving a person a very keen eye that allows them to really see evidence of the beautiful within the world around them. So if she wanted to take a photography course or if she wanted to take up a watercolor course, she could possibly do those things or pursue those things and potentially turn those into something that she is doing as a means of attaining financial success or greater financial freedom within this lifetime. And of those two things, I think that photography might be a better realm just because if you're not already a trained watercolorist or something, then it could possibly be a little bit challenging to break new ground within that industry. However, if you're taking beautiful photos and can find a way to use that or can find a way to sell that and let that be a means of you finding not only joy and pleasure, because people with Venus Neptune oftentimes just get great joy and pleasure from doing artistic pursuits in general, and one of their chief artistic pursuits tends to be taking photos because that's how they capture experiences of beauty within their lives. Then that's something that she can go into at any stage of life, really, as a means of not only doing something that she possibly will love, but also doing something that she possibly can be very good at as well. Now, the last thing I'll say about this chart, as far as the topic of finances is concerned, is that she does have the opposition of Mars at 25 degrees Cancer, 20 minutes, opposite her Jupiter at 22 degrees Capricorn, 54 minutes, and the Mars is ruling the 11th house, which represents the money that she makes from her career. This is a complicated situation because it's saying that the money that I make from my career is at war with me, and I too am at war with the money that I make from my career. What this could say to us, we also note that this Mars is in the 8th house of debt. What this could say to us is that she might find herself, or she may have found herself in the past, being gravitated towards sorts of work that don't actually have the ability to pay her the sort of money that she deserves or the sort of money that she needs. And as a result of that, the money that she made from her career may have left her in a state of debt, which is kind of knocking futs because we would imagine that the money that we make from our career would be something that helps to bolster us or that helps to take us out of a state of debt. But here we see that the money that she probably made from her career probably took her deeper into a valley of debt, and that could have been a very uncomfortable thing for her within this lifetime. When we take a look at that Mars from the perspective of her mother's money, because we note that the 10th house is the house of the mother, which means the 11th house is the house of the mother's money, there could have been a sense that she didn't even have access to her mother's money. Now, we already see in this chart some potential issues surrounding the mother. The moon, as a universal significator of the mother, is in a conjunction with Chiron in the 12th house, and everybody knows that Michael Bryan's moon Chiron research says that moon Chiron can show up as a very potent source of pain within the person's life in relationship with their mother. So she probably already had a very strained relationship from a maternal perspective as a result of the moon Chiron, and that could have represented a very real wound for her. And we see that even if there was anything to be gained from the mother in the form of a will or a testament or monies left behind, even the inheritance that she probably stood to gain from her mother, there could have been contention surrounding it, and that contention may have been such that she didn't have access or she wasn't allowed access to the funds or to the financial support of her mother within this lifetime. So that's another element that we see coming up. And this can also feed into this larger story of people not necessarily feeling as if they are nurtured in the way that they need to be nurtured, and sometimes having a fundamental mother wound of not being nurtured in the way that we need to be nurtured can lead to this larger sense of impoverishment within our lives that ends up showing up as a financial sense of lack later on. Because once again, the second house doesn't just have to do with money, it has to do with the ways in which we take care of ourselves. And so seeing this in the way that we're seeing it can say that from the maternal side of things, there could have been a real sense of disappointment, and there could have also been a sense that my mother didn't have the means to actually show up within my life and actually be the sort of mother I needed her to be, and not even in death was she able to do that either, as a result of the opposition that we see between the ruler of the mother's money and the actual native within this chart. If we go to the father as a means of seeing whether or not there was a sense of financial support and bolstering from the father, we also don't see that manifesting strongly, because the father's money is represented and ruled by the Venus, and she has Venus at 12 degrees of Libra, 21 minutes, in a corporal conjunction with Neptune. And so that's saying that not only was there challenges surrounding the mother's money within this lifetime, but there was also a sense of a wastage or a lack of abundance as far as the father's ability to show up and really give financial support within this lifetime as well. So both of these things are looking very complicated. In her declination table, we do see that she has the Mars in a contraparallel relationship with Jupiter, which is the Mars opposite Jupiter that we see within her natal chart. So this does tell us that she has the ability to work very hard and she has the ability to be very ambitious. And so I think that it's very well worth her choosing to be ambitious surrounding some of the things that we've spoken about already, as far as the sharing of information with others is concerned, whether that's teaching something she already knows or whether that's acquiring skills that can allow her to be within a more educational capacity with others within the world around her. She has the ability to be responsible enough to carry the weight of that as well, because she's a very responsible person. And we also see this inclination or this proclivity for doing things of an artistic nature by means of the Venus Neptune. I believe, it is my sincerest belief, that just because we go through a story at one stage of our lives doesn't mean that we have to continue going through that story throughout every stage of our lives. But it is completely on us to say, hey, I see the way how this story is panned out. And I realized that my natal chart might very clearly describe one cycle of this story panning out. But now, at this stage in my life, I'm willing to use my natal chart as a point of reference for some of the things I do not want to continue manifesting in my life. And as a result of that, lay the foundations to manifest something else. And that could be a tricky thing, because very often we get caught so deeply in the momentum of what we find going on within our charts that it becomes difficult for us to break the momentum of that. It becomes difficult for us to break the momentum of those stories, and it becomes difficult for us to choose to do something new with our lives. And in the beginning, it could feel completely unnatural to have gone from one financial status or one way of living and being with money to now making this complete 180 to trying to do something else. It could feel completely unnatural and completely forced. But the laws of competency says that we go through these stages of competency from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And that requires practice, and that requires dedication, and that requires us having the grit and the willingness to know that, hey, I've gone through this story already for the past however many years of my life, and I'm willing to break the cycle now. And what we see within this native's chart is that she does have the ability, and she does have the prowess, and she does have the strength to break some of these cycles as a result of the Mars-Jupiter connection, which is saying to us that in a very real sense, she does have this very strong resolve of power within herself that allows her to do the work that needs to be done. And that Mars Jupiter combination is also a combination that represents success within the work that is done. So, if she has experienced the opposite side of the story up until this point, this gives her permission to not only have more options in terms of what she chooses to do and how she chooses to do it, but it also gives her the opportunity to say, I see the story, I've heard the story, and now, as a result of hearing it, I'm willing to lay new seeds and I'm willing to carve out new pathways within my life so that I don't actually have to repeat this sort of astrological narrative again within this lifetime.
That is very helpful, and I can see every bit of what you've mentioned, including the mother and inheritance from mother and that kind of stuff, and conflicts with in-laws and so forth over what happens there. And I've also begun, I'm retired now, but I've also begun doing additional work making spiritual jewelry, so that ninth house stuff really comes through, and I make malas and so forth. And it's, it's helping, every bit helps. But the responsibility and the grit and all that kind of stuff is there too. So, but thank you. That's very helpful. And it makes it clear that there are it's very clear that there are reasons for all of this in here. And then it's like, I'm not just stupid. This just happens, So thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Can I ask you, was there a story that manifested in terms of the mother and in terms of any potential inheritance from the mother?
Two of them. One with respect to the nurturing. My mother, I grew up with four brothers and no sisters until I was almost out of the house. And I was not the kind of female my mother wanted for a daughter. She was a cheerleader and popular and all of that. And I was a nerd, and I was not the exuberant kind of person. She told me you don't have a date for the prom, but just go get one. Mom, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, just flirt. Well, I don't know how to do that. Anyway, so there was not a whole lot of nurturing there. When I did, went to law school and practiced law for a while, which I never enjoyed. But she would never even acknowledge it. She never asked me about how it was going, or it was like I was invisible to her. And she had very little at the time that she died, but she had said she wanted me to have a couple of specific things, and a huge set of silver items that, I was supposed to get. And my sister-in-law decided that I shouldn't have them because I might sell them because I had some financial needs, and she wasn't ready to let go of them. And so anyway, after weeks of working through it, I just decided it's not going to make or break my life. And she makes my brother happy, and she was good to Mom. Just back off and let her have it. It's, it's obviously more important to her than it is to me. So anyway, those are the two issues with respect to Mom.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for being willing to share your chart in this sort of space. And I think that what we see within your chart is just the evidence that everything that we go through within this lifetime, we go through it purposefully. And as a result of what we've gone through, we become the sort of people who we are today, with the sort of skills, with the sort of grit, with the sort of determination in order to do the work that needs to be done and in order to face some of the challenges that are specifically showing up within our own lives. So thank you so much for sharing this. If you've enjoyed today's show, then please remember to hit subscribe down below. I'm currently on a mission to get 12,000 subscribers across all platforms, which includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify by the end of November 2023. And it's a tall order, but I'm pretty sure we can do it because we make some really good astrological content here on the Oraculos Podcast. So please remember to hit subscribe down below, hit the notification bell so that you receive notifications of when we come out with these episodes on a daily basis. And please share the Oraculos Podcast with your other astrologically minded friends so that more and more people can know about the amazing work that we're doing over here on the Oraculos Podcast.